She died the year she loved him the most. Calvin, her longtime crush, locked her in the basement overnight just to please the girl he actually liked. That same night, a short circuit sparked a fire. The flames spread fast. The smoke was suffocating. She clawed at the door, screamed until her throat bled, but no one came. Just as her lungs gave out, a boy burst through the smoke, frantically smashing the lock with a stool. She couldn't see his face clearly, but she saw the fire licking at his clothes, saw him cradle her in his arms, desperate, fearless, as if her life mattered more than his. And then everything went black. She died in his arms. But death wasn't the end. Her soul lingered, hovering beside the boy who still clung to her body. The fire roared around him, but he didn't move. "Run," she screamed at him. "You're going to die too." But he couldn't hear the cries of a ghost. Firefighters arrived minutes later and dragged him out, kicking and screaming. That's when she finally left that cursed basement. Outside, the sun was shining. A beautiful day. Calvin was pacing nervously near the gate of the villa, looking anxious. Then someone rushed up to him, asking, did they get the girl out of the basement? He didn't even know she was already dead. She stood there, watching the boy she'd crushed on for 10 years. Even when she was burning alive, he hadn't dared to step in to save her. Meanwhile, the stranger who had held her in the flames now lifted her lifeless body into a sleek black car. He didn't say a word, didn't look at anyone, just gently buckled her into the passenger seat, like she was still alive. Then he drove off. The car sped away from the city, flying past the suburbs, then fields and villages, until it reached the sea. An empty, wild beach stretched ahead, untouched by development. The car stopped. He got out, carrying her, and walked into the ocean. Step by step. The waves kissed his knees, his waist. Then he whispered, "Emily, it's me. Benjamin. Do you remember?" Her eyes snapped open. She was no longer underwater. She was standing upright in a crowded classroom, surrounded by teenagers in school uniforms. 17-year-olds laughed and chattered around her. "Wait, what is this?" She looked down. In her hand was a crumpled love letter. "Is that for Calvin?" someone teased, nudging her shoulder. She froze. The neat handwriting on the envelope read, "To Calvin." Her heart skipped. She knew exactly what day this was. She was back. Back in high school. The very afternoon she'd confessed her feelings to Calvin in front of the entire class. Just 5 minutes before he walked through that door. Her hands trembled. The words he said that day echoed in her mind, "Sorry. I'm not looking for a relationship right now." But this time she could change it. She shook her head slowly. "No, this isn't right. That's not how it happened. Or maybe it is. But they're wrong." Then the classroom door creaked open. Calvin stepped in, tall, casual, the center of everyone's attention. A voice called out teasingly, "Calvin, Emily's looking for you." Gasps, whispers. Everyone turned to stare. Emily took a deep breath, then calmly tore the letter in half. "Never mind," she said evenly. "They're just joking." She walked over to the trash can and tossed the broken pieces away. Calvin paused. His eyes locked onto hers, unreadable. But he said nothing. He walked past her and took a seat. Around them, a wave of disappointment rippled through the crowd. "Man, I thought we'd see some drama," someone muttered. Emily sat down quietly and opened a book, but her mind was racing. Everyone else was packing up. School was almost over. But something felt different. Off. Then the homeroom teacher walked in, and the room fell silent. "That's weird," someone whispered. "It's already past the bell." The teacher gave a stern look and gestured toward the door. "Come in." And he did. Benjamin. She remembered him now. A transfer student in their senior year. Quiet, shy. He always wore a faded school uniform and carried a worn-out backpack, a sharp contrast to the designer brands and luxury pens of their elite private academy. That was probably why he never fit in. Always in the back row. Always scribbling equations while everyone else whispered or flirted or planned vacations. But he was brilliant. always in the top 3 of the entire year, and when it came to science, he was practically unbeatable. My name is Benjamin. I transferred from City B, he said, giving a slight bow. The teacher nodded and pointed to an empty seat. You'll sit there. It was right behind her. She watched as he walked past measured steps, quiet eyes, and sat down. He pulled out his textbook and arranged it neatly. There was a stiffness to his movements, like he wasn't sure if he belonged. But he did.
He would.
At 17 there was still time. Still hope. The class erupted in noise again the moment the teacher left. Whispers turned into snickers. Marco the class clown and spoiled brat leaned over. City B? That's a mining town, right? My family has businesses there. What's your dad's name? Maybe my father knows him. Benjamin fidgeted. My dad doesn't have a business. He's just works in a coal mine. Marco snorted before he could finish. I knew it. Laughter exploded around them. In this school, kids learned early how to suck up to the rich and mock the poor. Marco leaned in closer, grabbed Benjamin's textbook, and sniffed it like a dog. Smells like coal dust. Thought. The room roared. And that's when she snapped. She stood up, grabbed her water cup, and poured it right over Marco's smug head. What are you, a bloodhound now? She said coldly. Silence. Marco shot her a glare, water dripping from his hair, his voice laced with fury. Emily, are you looking to die? She smiled coldly. Already did, thanks. Maybe in her past life, she had been shy-meek even.
But now?
The Emily standing here wasn't 17 anymore. She was 28, and death had stripped away her fear. Yeah, she said calmly. I guess I am looking to die. Before things could escalate, Calvin stepped in. He frowned, clearly displeased. What's with you today? Just go home. As class president and heir to the powerful Jean family, Calvin had always been untouchable. Marco wouldn't dare mess with him. But Emily, she couldn't even look at him now without picturing flames licking the ceiling, the choking smoke, and the crushing betrayal. The boy she once adored had left her to die. From now on, I won't be walking home with you anymore, she said, her tone steady. I'll be staying behind for exam prep. Calvin raised an eyebrow, baffled. What kind of nonsense is that, Emily? The kind where I don't want to see your face, she replied. Then pointed toward the door. Mind leaving? You're blocking my study time, mister. Class president. I believe the class beauty Elysius waiting for you right outside. Calvin blinked. He and Alice had grown up with her, the three of them tangled in childhood memories and family business ties. For the longest time, Emily believed Calvin cared for her. He used to call her Little Emmy, treating her like some fragile sibling. But the truth? The one he liked had always been Alice. Outside, Alice waved at them through the door. Calvin, what are you talking about with Emily? Are we leaving or not? Calvin gave Emily one last glance. He tapped her desk with his finger. You suck at physics. I'll help you this weekend. Then slung his bag over his shoulder and walked off toward Alice. And just like that, they were gone. Only Benjamin and Emily remained in the quiet classroom. The ticking of the wall clock echoed in the room. Behind her, Benjamin's pen scratched softly across a sheet of paper. She had always remembered him as the quiet top student, serious, diligent, invisible to most. But now she turned around slowly, resting her arm on the back of her chair, and studied him. His brows, the way his lips curved in focus, began to blur and morph into the image of the boy who had held her in a burning basement. Emily, it's me, Benjamin. Do you remember? That's what he'd whispered before walking into the sea with her dead body in his arms. Maybe she stared too long, because he looked up, puzzled. Is there something on my face? He asked, fingers brushing his cheek. And no, she stammered, snapping back. The tension between them grew awkward. To break it, she blindly grabbed a physics worksheet from her desk and slid it in front of him. Can you explain this problem to me? Benjamin relaxed immediately. He glanced at the question and smiled. Actually, this one's pretty easy. Easy for him. Not for her. Emily had always sucked at physics, always dragging down the class average. Benjamin pulled out a scratch sheet and jotted down 2 formulas, his handwriting neat and fast.
See?
It's like this. Then that. Then he paused and asked, "Do you understand?" She blinked. He chuckled gently. "Thought so. Let's start with the basics then." She gave a sheepish nod, and he closed the worksheet, pulling out the actual textbook instead. "Let's go chapter by chapter," he said, his voice calm, patient. Emily had to admit was a far better tutor than her stiff old physics teacher. Better than Calvin, too. In her past life, she had constantly pestered Calvin with dumb questions. "Calvin, can you help me understand kinetic energy? Why can't I solve the last math problem?" "Calvin, what does this mean? Are you stupid, Emily?" he used to snap. "You can't even solve this?" It was no wonder he'd always looked at her with that cold, annoyed glare. But Benjamin? He didn't mind explaining. He didn't make her feel dumb. That warmth lingered until a loud knock startled them both. The security guard stood at the doorway, arms crossed. "Why are you two still here? It's late. Do I need to call your parents?" They checked the time, nearly 8 p.m. The school was about to lock up. They scrambled to grab their bags, apologizing as they rushed down the halls. Outside, a black car honked sharply and pulled up beside her. The window rolled down. "Emmy," the driver called. It was Alex, the family chauffeur. "Hurry up. Your mom's waiting for dinner." His voice wasn't exactly friendly, more like scolding. Emily opened the car door, then turned to Benjamin. "It's late. Want a ride home?" He hesitated, his expression tight.
No, thanks.
"I live out west. It's in the opposite direction." Then he smiled, polite but strained. "There's still a bus. It's fine." He gave a small wave and jogged off toward the bus stop. She watched him go. The western suburbs were far, over an hour by bus. She'd only been there once, crowded, underdeveloped, the streets full of garbage and aging buildings. She called out, "Benjamin." He stopped and turned. "Do you know my name?" she asked. Under the soft yellow glow of the street lamp, he flushed slightly. "It's Emily," she said firmly. "Don't forget it." Time travel didn't come with a cheat sheet. All the knowledge from her past life hadn't followed her here. It was tragic, honestly. She'd only ever been an average student. Nothing special. And now she had to make up for it, nights hunched over textbooks, highlighters marking every line, pages filled with notes. She wasn't smart, but she was persistent. As she battled through chapter after chapter, her phone buzzed, making her jump. It was Alice. A photo from WeChat. And Emily's stomach dropped. The study room in the library smelled faintly of tea and ink. 2 half-empty cups of milk tea sat on the table next to open textbooks. Alice scrunched up her nose in annoyance. "Emmy, Calvin's going to the library again this weekend. I don't even study cultural subjects, it's so boring. You coming?" Alice was a dance student, so being surrounded by equations and history wasn't exactly her idea of a good time. And Calvin, well, in the past, Emily never questioned his strange ideas. But seriously, who takes a girl on a date to the library? "No," Emily replied simply, without looking up from her book. Alice didn't press. She just shrugged and scrolled on her phone. But Emily couldn't focus. Her thoughts kept drifting, pages blurring into each other. She missed how clearly Benjamin had explained things the other day. That afternoon, everything had clicked. She reached for her phone, opened the class group's contact sheet, and found his number. He picked up quickly. "Benja," she said cheerfully. "Emily," he replied, surprised. She laughed softly. "I was going through a problem and thought of you. Hope I'm not interrupting." They ended up chatting far longer than she expected about the strict teachers, the shameless ones, and ancient school gossip that had floated around for years but Benjamin had somehow never heard. He nodded along, throwing in exaggerated reactions that made her laugh. He really was kind. So kind, in fact, it confused her. Why couldn't she remember when she'd first met him? Surely someone like that she would have remembered. After they hung up, she opened WeChat out of habit and froze. Calvin had posted a status update. "Reviewed some physics concepts today. Pretty productive." The photo was a close-up of his workbook. Dozens of classmates had already liked and commented. Class rep. Save me. Physics is killing me. Wait, even Calvin's getting serious? At this rate, he's going to ace the college entrance exam. Please chill. Before Benjamin transferred in, Calvin had always been the top scorer in class's grades miles ahead of everyone else. But once Benjamin arrived, things changed. The two took turns holding first place. Their academic rivalry became a hot topic, everyone waiting eagerly to see who'd come out on top. Strangely, though, Emily could barely recall them speaking to each other more than a handful of times. They were like two stars orbiting in the same skyclose, but never colliding. That night, Emily felt oddly guilty for bothering Benjamin so much. So she headed to the kitchen, dug through the pantry, and baked a batch of cookies to give him. Baking used to be a little hobby of hers back in her old life. She'd often brought Calvin homemade sweets, cookies, cakes, little treats she'd poured her heart into. But once, during a visit to his office, she'd seen one of her cookie boxes shoved in a drawer. Only one cookie had been eaten. The rest had gone stale. Moldy, even. That was when she realized. He never liked them. Never liked her offerings. Her mother, hearing the oven noises, came downstairs. Baking again, she frowned. Calvin doesn't even like those. Why not try something else? Who said they're for Calvin? Emily answered boldly. They're for a new classmate. Her mother blinked, clearly surprised by her change in attitude. The next day, during recess, Emily quietly placed the cookie box on Benjamin's desk. He opened it with care. His eyes lit up genuine surprise, joy, and maybe even a bit of disbelief. Emily, you're the first person who's ever baked something for me, he said, smiling. That warmth filled her chest. Being appreciated, it felt good. But then Calvin emerged from the teacher's office, a stack of graded papers in his arms. He walked past them, paused, and turned abruptly. You made those? He asked. Both Emily and Benjamin jumped a little. Calvin stared at the cookie box for a moment, then muttered, Didn't you say you wouldn't just bake for anyone? Emily scratched her head. She had said that back in her old life, when she was chasing Calvin's approval. Only you get to try my homemade desserts, she told him once. Damn it. Why did he have to remember that? She lowered her gaze, guilty, and said nothing. Calvin, sensing her silence, turned to Benjamin. I heard you're good at physics. He placed a paper on Benjamin's desk like it was nothing, but his tone was oddly sharp. You don't have to be so modest, he added when Benjamin tried to deflect. 98 points is impressive. This was your transfer test, right? I just picked it up from the office. Emily leaned in. Except for a few points lost on the last long question, everything else was perfect. Calvin tapped the mark. That one's from the physics competition pool. Think on it a bit. In their past life, Calvin had been preparing for that very competition with a private tutor. He ended up winning a national prize and bonus points for the college entrance exam. Emily, who'd been silently listening, didn't even notice he had turned back to her until he flicked her forehead. You get it, he teased. She scowled. Don't be so cocky. You really think I can't improve? He actually smiled just slightly. There was a trace of something gentle in his eyes. Why didn't you come to the library last weekend? Didn't I promise to help you? That was new. He'd never said anything like that before. But she shook her head. No need. I'll ask Benjamin. He sits right behind me. Calvin's expression froze. His gaze shifted from her to Benjamin and back again. Without a word, he picked up the papers and walked off. But after a few steps, he turned around and said coolly, Emily, Alice is throwing a celebration party this Saturday. You coming? Emily blinked. That party, it was the turning point of everything. Alice was a student in the arts track, and as long as she passed the basic cultural subjects, her acceptance into a university was all but guaranteed. In her previous life, she had excelled. Prestigious dance schools had extended invitations, eager to recruit her. It was a big deal. Her father threw her a celebratory banquet at a 5-star hotel and even gave her a 2-day pass to hang out with friends as long as she didn't stay out overnight. That rule made sense. Alice had a reputation for partying. Her friend circle was wide, colorful, unpredictable. That night, she booked a luxury suite at the most extravagant KTV in the city. Emily had gone, of course. The place was packed. Classmates from their school mingled with art students from elsewhere, a noisy, chaotic blur of neon lights and music. In the middle of it all, Alice and Calvin stood surrounded by friends, laughing as they were coaxed into singing a duet. The room roared with energy. Around midnight, Emily's phone lit up with a video call. It was her mom. Alice, peering over her shoulder, scoffed. "My mom told me she went shopping with your mom today. They're probably playing mahjong at your place right now. I turned off my phone so I wouldn't get dragged home. Don't answer it, she'll just ask you to take me back." But Emily had always been the obedient daughter. She answered. Sure enough, both mothers were on the screen. Alice's mom immediately launched into a tirade. So loud. "Do you know what time it is? Alice, are you coming home or not? Tell me where you are, I'll send the driver." Alice rolled her eyes and hissed under her breath. "Mom, stop it. I finished my exams. Can't I have one night to breathe? I'm not going to die from this." The two women argued. Both were notoriously stubborn. But in the end, her mother said the one thing that silenced Alice completely. "If you don't come home tonight, forget your allowance next month." Alice, the princess of their school, received 50,000 yuan a month in pocket money. The threat landed hard. She hung up with a curse and sulked, muttering that her long-awaited freedom had been crushed. Calvin, to his credit, escorted them downstairs and waited in the hotel lobby with them for the car. But Alice didn't say a single word to him. She was clearly upset. During her call with her mother, she had been signaling desperately for Calvin to step in, maybe say something to defend her, even just a polite, "Don't worry, Auntie. I'll take care of Alice tonight." Alice's mother adored Calvin. Everyone knew she was hoping to set them up. If he had said anything, even one sentence, it might have turned the situation around. But he didn't. That night, Calvin remained cold, aloof, silent as Alice was pulled away from the party she'd wanted so badly. "It's all your fault," Alice muttered as they waited for the car. "Neither of you are worth anything. You ruin everything." And maybe she was right. That night, as they drove home, the accident happened. Later, the police determined their driver, Alex, had been driving under the influence. He was fully responsible. Emily and Alice spent half a month in the hospital. Alice's injuries were worse: ligament damage in her leg that meant no dancing for years. Her mother broke down in the hospital room, clutching at Alex, demanding he pay with his life. He was held accountable, legally and financially. But what did that matter? The He family didn't lack money. What they lost couldn't be bought back. That night changed everything. If the accident hadn't happened, Alice would have stayed in the country. The three of them, Alice, Calvin, and Emily Wildv, continued on as they were. Maybe, years later, Calvin and Alice would have ended up together. Emily might have cried, sure. But she would have wished them well and found her own path. Instead, Alice left the country and transferred to an art school overseas. Calvin and Emily ended up attending universities in the same city. Occasionally, they'd run into each other. Calvin knew she had feelings for him, but his most common line wasn't affectionate, was guilt. "Emily," he'd say, "don't you think you're being unfair to Alice?" They were both tangled in guilt. Calvin would fly across provinces just to buy Alice almond cakes from Macau. If Alice mentioned wanting concert tickets, he'd stay up all night refreshing pages, just to take her to see Jay Cho live. He never missed a gift: birthdays, holidays, anniversaries. He remembered them all. Years passed. Eventually, Alice returned from abroad. Calvin gathered old friends and threw her a welcome-back party. That night, after hours of karaoke, Alice grabbed the mic and suddenly turned to Emily. "Emily," she slurred, eyes half-lidded, "it's been years since graduation. Does your mom still freak out when you stay out late?" The room froze. Dead silence. Emily sat still, her fingers curling tightly under the table. She knew. Alice had never forgiven her. "Alice," Calvin began wearily. "Don't interrupt," Alice snapped, her tone sharp despite the alcohol. She turned to Emily with a mocking smile. "You're such a good girl, aren't you, Emily? Always the perfect classmate. But you don't play well with others, do you? Why don't we help you outlock you in a little room all by yourself? You'd like that, right?" She wrapped herself around Calvin's arm, voice dripping with sweetness. Emily couldn't respond.
Her throat was dry.
She wanted to argue, to stand up for herself, but the weight of guilt crushed her. She felt like she owed Alice something. Calvin looked torn. He met Emily's eyes for a second, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. Together, he and Alice locked Emily in a basement. "Emily," Alice called through the door, her voice sing-song and cruel. "When the party's over, I'll come let you out." But the party went on. Too long. And then something sparked. The fire started. The flames came for her. But this time, she wouldn't let it end the same way. Not again. Not in this life. Emily knew she couldn't stop Alice from celebrating her exam results. That part was inevitable. But this time she simply wouldn't go. If she didn't attend, Alex wouldn't drive her home. That one change might shift everything. On Saturday night, Calvin called her. "Emily, when are you coming?" The background noise was deafening music, laughter, shouting. But Emily stayed quiet. "I'm not going," Emily had said, her voice steady. "I have studying to do." There was a beat of silence on the line before Calvin replied coolly, "Suit yourself." She hung up, knowing full well that by now, her reputation as the class nerd was probably spreading like wildfire. Around midnight, she came downstairs to grab some water. To her surprise, Alex, the family driver, was still in the kitchen, sipping beer and chatting with an old army buddy on video call. He waved when he saw her. "Emmy, what are you still doing up?" She opened her mouth to say something but hesitated. Then quietly said, "Alex, you're not young anymore. Maybe you should cut back on the drinking." He laughed it off, not taking it seriously. Meanwhile, in the living room, a group of middle-aged women were deep in a fierce game of mahjong. Alice's mother, grinning ear to ear after a lucky winning streak, suddenly paused and looked at the clock. "Wait, Alice went out tonight. I wonder if she's home yet." She grabbed her phone and called. No answer. Called again. Still nothing. "Her phone's off," she muttered. Her friends coaxed her back to the game. "Come on, your turn to be the banker. You're not gonna run off now, are you? Not after winning all that cash." Alice's mom laughed and waved it off.
"Relax."
"What am I, a cheater?" Emily lay in bed, eyes fixed on the ticking clock, the quiet hum of the night lulling her slowly to sleep. Everything seemed peaceful. The next morning, she was jolted awake by her mother's voice. "Emily, come down for breakfast." Still half asleep, she grabbed her phone and began scrolling through WeChat. That's when she saw it. A classmate had posted a photo with the caption, "Campus Queen and Top Studento, they make a cute couple." The photo showed Alice and Calvin asleep on the KTV couch, heads tilted slightly together. Her head rested on his shoulder. Both of them looked peaceful, completely worn out. The party had clearly gone late into the night. Someone, sensing drama, had snapped a picture and posted it online. The comments were instant. "I knew something was up with those two. Hottest couple in school, hands down." The moment she saw it, Emily bolted upright. That's when it hit her. The accident hadn't happened. Alice never left the party early. Everything was okay. She gave the photo a big thumbs up, her fingers trembling. She even commented, "This is how it should be." But when she refreshed the page a few minutes later, the post was gone. Calvin called. "Emily," he said without context, "things got really loud last night. I ended up falling asleep in the middle of it. Didn't stay long." Why is he telling me this? She wondered. Then, more softly, he added, "If I'd known you weren't going, I wouldn't have gone either."
She didn't know what to say.
Her fingers rubbed the tip of her nose awkwardly. "Well, I'm gonna grab breakfast," she muttered. "See you at school." "Yeah," he replied quietly.
"See you."
By Monday, though the post had vanished, the rumors had already spread.
Fast.
Nearly everyone who attended Alice's party had something to whisper. Emily, however, kept her head down. She had other things to focus on, like the upcoming monthly exam results. This was Benjamin's first major test since transferring in. Their homeroom teacher teased the results dramatically. "This time we have a dark horse. Competition makes progress." Then paused for effect. First in the class, Benjamin. The classroom erupted. It was the first time Calvin had ever been dethroned. "Wait, Benjamin? The quiet guy who never talks. He beat Calvin? Damn. And we're about to hit college entrance season." Emily knew how talented Benjamin was, but she still squealed in excitement. She turned and gleefully ruffled his hair. "You're amazing, Benjamin." His dark hair was left a tangled mess, but he just smiled, warm and calm. From across the desk, her seatmate elbowed her discreetly. "Emily, tone it down," he whispered. "Look, class rep's not happy." She followed his eyes, and there was Calvin, sitting by the window, watching. His face was stone, lips pressed into a hard line, gaze cold as ice. Her hand froze midair. Suddenly, she felt a chill.
Crap.
That was unkind of me, wasn't it? Calvin had been the top student for nearly 3 years. Getting knocked to second, anyone would feel upset. And here she was, laughing and bouncing around like it was a party. She coughed, embarrassed, and lowered her voice. After a few minutes, Calvin finally looked away. She exhaled deeply. Thanks to Benjamin's help, her own grades had improved dramatically. Every Friday after school, she now stayed behind for a 2-hour study session with Hyman, unofficial tutoring session that had become her favorite part of the week. But this time, something unexpected happened. Calvin didn't leave either. As the final bell rang, Alice rushed to their classroom door. "Calvin, let's go home," she called, beaming. Calvin didn't move. He didn't even pack his bag. From his seat, he said plainly, "You go ahead. I'm going to study a little more." His words caught the attention of the remaining students. "Dude, why? You already got the score reduction offer. Seriously, what are you still working so hard for?" Calvin had already secured a 60-point bonus from winning the physics Olympiad. Even if he slacked off, he'd still make the cutoff for his dream university. But he ignored them. When the classroom emptied, Calvin stood and without a word dragged his chair next to Emily. She blinked. "Huh." He opened his textbook. "You sit near Benjamin. It's easier to discuss problems here." What?" She was speechless. Should she give up her seat? Let the 2 top scorers have their genius session in peace? But before she could move, Calvin had already pulled out a question. "Benjamin, any tricks for this one? I think I'm overcomplicating it." The problem Calvin pulled out turned out to be the exact one Emily had missed on her last exam. So, rather than pushing him away, she stayed quiet, listening as the 2 academic giants debated methods and perspectives. Sitting there between them, she felt like a tiny fish benefiting from the wake of 2 massive whales. She didn't mind. By the time the clock neared 8, Emily's brain felt like it had been wrung dry. Her thoughts were fuzzy, on the brink of sublimation. Calvin closed a book and lightly tapped her forehead with it. "Emily, it's time to go home." She blinked. Right. Let's go." Ever since she'd told her mom she'd be staying after school on Fridays for extra study, Alex had been scheduled to pick her up 2 hours later. Benjamin, as usual, refused a ride. He always insisted on taking the bus back to the western suburbs. And today, Calvin also tagged along. Emily was surprised of all people, didn't have a driver waiting. "Let Alex drop me off," Calvin said without shame. "Didn't our families used to take turns picking us up after school?" Emily shot him a look. "Class Rep Jean, maybe you should take a page out of Benjamin's book and contribute to the cause of energy conservation and emission reduction." Calvin didn't even pretend to respect that argument. "Maybe I'll just call your mom and tell her you abandoned me outside the school in the dead of night. Would she be okay with that?" The audacity. Truly impressive. They ended up sitting together in the back seat while Alex drove in silence. For a moment, Emily felt like even with Calvin, conversation had become harder. Outside the car, the city slipped by blurred lights and sleepy roads. Then Calvin turned to her. Emily, the college entrance exam's just a few months away. Have you decided where you're applying? That question caught her off guard. She hadn't. But it was about time. She thought about the sea. She wanted to go south, to a city warm and humid, where the ocean could be part of her daily view. But in her past life, Calvin had chosen a northern university and so had she, just to be near him. That city wasn't bad, just not for her. Calvin noticed her silence. Let me know when you've decided, he said softly. Then, after a pause, added, I want to go to the same city as you. Emily didn't respond right away. Didn't you already choose your school? She asked. He'd been accepted with point reductions into one of the top elite universities in the Count Tryon institution with deep connections to the Jean family. Most of their family friends and relatives had studied there. He had no reason to change. But Calvin just shook his head and repeated, I want to be in the same city as you. That night, lying in bed, Emily had no intention of entertaining Calvin's sudden sentimentality. Instead, she messaged Benjamin. Hey, Benja, have you decided where you want to go to college? She sent it, then winced. With his scores, he could get into any school. What kind of question was that? But he replied quickly. Not yet. You? Somewhere warm and humid. I want to be near the ocean. As she typed, she imagined a breeze, the scent of salt, the sound of waves. Benjamin replied almost instantly. What a coincidence. Me too. Liar. He was clearly just copying her. But she smiled. In her previous life, she'd worked so hard, but most of that effort had been to follow Calvin. This time she wanted to work for herself. As the second semester of senior year kicked in, the atmosphere at school grew intense. The countdown to the Gaokao loomed over everyone. Even at their private school, the traditions were followed to the letter. The principal scheduled a pre-exam motivation assembly and invited top students to give speeches. Naturally, both Calvin and Benjamin were selected to represent their grade. Emily remembered that assembly from her past life, how mind-numbingly boring it had been. She had dozed through most of it until Calvin stepped on stage. His speech had been polished, articulate, and utterly dull. After he finished, she'd snuck out of the auditorium and wandered around the sports field. She had no memory of Benjamin's speech. Maybe he went on after she left. That thought made her feel a little guilty. But this time, she was determined not to miss it. She sat up straight, eyes fixed on the stage. Calvin spoke, first charming, confident, everything expected of a Jean. Then nothing. Benjamin didn't come out. The crowd began to thin, the final names were called, and still no Benjamin. Concern growing, Emily stopped one of the student council organizers. Hey, where's Benjamin from class 3? He was supposed to speak, right? The student frowned. I've been wondering the same thing. We tried calling him, no answer. It's messed up the whole order. A sense of unease crept up her spine. She stood up. Something's wrong. She ran out of the auditorium, dialing his number over and over. No answer. The campus was massive. She ran like a headless chicken, darting through classroom buildings, scanning corridors. Her calls kept ringing out to nothing. He's not a child, she muttered to herself.
He's fine.
He has to be fine. But when she reached the track field, a flash of memory hit her like a truck. In her previous life, right after Calvin's speech, she had wandered the same way, skipping the rest of the assembly. She remembered walking past the gym, hearing noise shouting. Curious, she had peeked through the window. A group of boys had surrounded someone. They were hitting him, kicking him, laughing. Slurs filled the air. And she had frozen. But this time she knew who it was. It was Benjamin. She remembered it so clearly now, how she had barged into that gym in her past life, pulled the boy out of the circle of tormentors and shouted, "If you touch him again, I'll report you to the teacher." At the time, it was just a moment of raw instinct. But now she knew that boy had been Benjamin. And she wasn't going to be late this time. Emily sprinted down the corridor, slammed the gym door open, and burst into the room. The scene in front of her was a perfect copy of the one buried in her memory. Benjamin was in the center, surrounded. Marco was there, of course, along with the usual pack of rich kids who followed his lead. So, what if your family works in a coal mine? One of them sneered. You think you're better than us because you're smart? You want to get on stage and give a speech? Over my dead body. I hate nerds like you. You act all superior, but what talent do you really have? Emily had spent enough time with Benjamin by now to see what she had missed in her past life. Beneath his calm exterior, he was always alone. He didn't belong to any clique. His humble background, his quiet manner, his transfer mid-year, they made him a perfect target in a school where kids formed circles of influence and looked down on outsiders. He didn't fit in, so they excluded him, bullied him. She had been his only friend. And now she realized just how lonely that must have felt in the life before this one. Maybe that was why even the smallest kindness had left such a deep mark on him. Maybe all she had done was pull him away from Marco one time, but to Benjamin, it had meant everything. Emily, Marco said, seeing her storm in. What, trying to play the hero now? But Emily didn't back down. More students were arriving now. The assembly had just ended, and people were trickling out, some drawn by the noise. The gym doors creaked open as curious classmates peeked inside. This wasn't like last time. There was an audience now. Marco smirked, emboldened. You know, he said loudly, I've been noticing something weird between you two. What's your deal, Emily? Got a little thing going with the class genius? The crowd rippled with whispers and barely contained grins. Let's do this, Marco continued. If you admit you like him, I'll apologize. Chapter 13. Their school thrived on gossip. Half the crowd let out synchronized ahoo's. Who is that? Someone whispered. Emily from class 4. And she's top of our grade. Benjamin stood up quickly and tugged Emily's hand. His face was pale, his voice soft. Emily, don't worry about me. With this many people around, they won't do anything. But Emily had never been the type to back down from a challenge. Yeah, I like Benjamin. So what? She said boldly. Is it against the rules to have a crush? Where in the student handbook does it say you can't fall in love? The words came out louder than she expected. But being honest wasn't as scary as she remembered. For a moment, the gym went completely still. No one spoke. Even the usual hecklers froze. It was Marco, surprisingly, who broke the silence, stammering, Emily, you're like a real heroine or something. Before anything else could be said, a stern voice cut through the crowd. What's going on here? A path opened in the crowd like parting water. The student council president walked in, sharp-eyed and authoritative. Emily recognized him vaguely. The college entrance exam is right around the corner, he snapped. You want to throw your future away with a suspension? He scanned the group, then pointed at Marco and his gang. You come with me. Bullying is strictly prohibited in this school. Don't pretend like you haven't read the rules. Technically, yes, school regulations forbade bullying. But in reality, these cases usually stayed under wraps. Today, though, Marco had pushed too far. The student council president turned to the figure standing quietly beside him. Calvin, I'll go explain the situation to the teachers. You coming? That's when Emily noticed him, Calvin, standing just behind the president, half hidden in the shadows. She hadn't even realized he was there. Calvin shook his head. Then, his gaze flicked to Benjamin. Let Benjamin come too, he said. He was involved. He should clarify things. Chapter 14. The president nodded and gestured for everyone to follow. Marco, seeing no way out, groaned, No, I don't want to see the dean. Too bad, the president replied, smacking him lightly on the head. With the main cast being escorted away, the onlookers scattered. Emily was about to follow Benjamin, maybe wait outside the office with him, when someone grabbed her wrist. Calvin. His grip was firm, but his expression, his face was pale, lips trembling slightly. Emily, he said, voice tight. Come with me. Just for a moment. She hesitated. What are you doing? She asked, wary. But he didn't let go. He pulled her toward a quiet corner, out of sight. He was taller than her, too close now, and the pressure of his presence felt suffocating. Emily, he said again, forcing his voice to stay calm. I understand you wanted to help Benjamin today, but you could have told a teacher.
Or me. You didn't have to make a scene like that. Oh.
So that's what he thought. That her confession was just a show. A convenient lie. She laughed bitterly. You're wrong, Calvin. I didn't say it to play the hero. I said it because it's true. I really like Benjamin. He didn't respond right away. He just stared at her, stunned into silence. And then his expression twisted. Confusion. Hurt. Maybe even betrayal? Slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled something out, a torn piece of letter paper. Crumpled. Familiar. You're lying, right? His voice cracked. If you really like Benjamin, then what was this? Emily stared at the letter in his hands. Her heart skipped. That was the love letter she had written to Calvin. The one she had torn apart and thrown in the trash weeks ago. Why? She began. Calvin gave a crooked smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. I picked it out of the garbage, he admitted. I admit, Calvin said quietly. Back then I wasn't sure how much I liked you. And I was afraid that dating during our senior year might mess with my studies. But I never thought, Emily, that you'd fall for someone else. As he held that torn letter in his hand, Emily didn't feel guilt. She felt relief. That secret love she had once carried for so long, it was over. And that was okay. She reached out, took the letter from his hand, and ripped it into even smaller pieces. Then she turned around, opened the window behind her, and released them into the wind. The scraps fluttered away, carried by the breeze, never to be gathered again. Calvin's expression shifted. He rushed toward the window, gripping the frame with both hands. Emily, Calvin, she said firmly, the moment I threw that letter away, that should have been your answer. I don't like you anymore. And from now on, unless it's something truly important, don't come looking for me. She smiled faintly. You were right. We all need to focus on the college entrance exam. Let's stick to that. Chapter 15. The next morning, the classroom buzzed with whispers the moment Emily walked in.
She didn't blush.
She didn't squirm. She simply took her seat, opened her book, and began reading. But something felt off. It was already morning study period, and Benjamin still hadn't arrived. She nudged her seatmate. Where's Benjamin? Her deskmate shot her a look, part teasing, part knowing. You haven't heard? After yesterday's chaos, Marco's been made a public example. He's got to apologize in front of everyone this morning. Benjamin, I think he's with the teachers right now. Just as she finished speaking, the classroom's speaker crackled to life. The dean's voice echoed. There's been a serious case of bullying at our school. Due to its impact, several students will be offering public apologies. On cue, Marco and his cronies walked in, wilted and pale, nothing like their usual arrogant selves. They each muttered apologies with their heads bowed. The class stifled giggles. Emily couldn't help letting out a loud laugh. Then came the real moment. The dean turned to Benjamin. Do you accept their apologies? Benjamin's voice was calm. Honestly, I never paid them any attention. People who weren't even on your level, what did it matter how loudly they barked? Emily nearly clapped beneath her desk. But what he said next knocked the air from her lungs. Also, I always felt confessions should come from me. Emily, I like you. Her brain short-circuited. Her seatmate choked on their water.
Whoa.
You two are just out here spreading PDA in front of the whole school. The consequence? Both Benjamin and Emily were assigned to write reflections for disrupting the order. But honestly, it was worth it. After that, they could hold hands openly on campus. Sure, some people said dating in high school was a distraction, but how could it be a bad thing when your boyfriend was the top student in the province? Studying with Benjamin made even the most complex science problems feel engaging. The pressure of their final year seemed lighter. Time passed in a blur. And Calvin? At some point, Emily realized she hadn't noticed him in weeks. He no longer stayed after school on Fridays. Even when they passed each other on campus, he'd lower his gaze and hurry past. It seemed he really had listened. He was no longer trying to disturb her. Chapter 16. The day college exam results were released, Emily and Benjamin were at a cyber cafe, laughing over a game. She was dragging him through some low-level strategy when their class group chat exploded. It's out. The results are up. Phones were snatched. Games abandoned. Teammates betrayed. Emily entered her exam ID with trembling fingers. Her score popped up 30 or 40 points higher than her usual range. She shrieked. She turned to Benjamin's screen only to see something strange. His page showed 0 points. What? She gasped. Did you forget to fill in your name? Entered the wrong ID. Benjamin shook his head. He slowly pointed to a tiny line at the bottom of the screen. Your rank is within the top 50 in the province. Please wait for further details. The score wasn't shown because it was too high. She screamed again, threw her arms around him, shaking with joy. The guy next to them, who had been mid-game, pulled off his headset. Dude, how many people did you kill to get that excited? Emily blushed. Benja, she whispered. What university are you applying to? He smiled, ruffled her hair, and said, whichever one you're going to. Not long after, a prestigious Southern university offered Benjamin a full-ride scholarship with his choice of major. Emily was accepted to the neighboring teachers' college. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Except Calvin. Chapter 17. Just days before college submission deadlines, Emily received a call from Calvin's father. Emily, he said politely, could you do me a favor and convince Calvin to stick to the original plan and attend a Grande?
A Grande.
The elite university that had offered Calvin a 60-point admission reduction. That call caught Emily off guard. She hadn't known Calvin had underperformed. His exam results weren't good enough for his first-choice business programs. But with the bonus points from a Grande, he could still follow the path mapped out for him. She didn't understand why Calvin's father was asking her. First of all, a Grande was one of the most prestigious institutions in the country. Why wouldn't Calvin jump at the chance? And second, she was an outsider now. What could she possibly say to change his mind? But Mr. Jean was an elder, and Emily couldn't bring herself to say no. After ending the call with Calvin's father, Emily stared at her phone for a long while. Then, with a sigh, she dialed Calvin's number. It rang for a long time before he finally picked up. There was a pause. And then, she asked softly, Calvin, have you still not decided where to apply? His voice was low and tired.
No.
Not yet. For a moment, something unexpected welled up inside her frustration. Frustration not at him, but at how far he'd fallen from the version of himself she used to admire. Seriously, she snapped. Calvin, are you out of your mind? If you don't choose a Grande, where the hell are you going to go? With your scores, do you realize how stupid it would be to settle for a mid-tier school? It's such a waste. She didn't know if her words were too sharp. But for a while, he said nothing. Then, after a long silence, he murmured, Emily, I'm scared.
She froze.
I'm scared that if we end up too far apart, you'll forget about me. Her heart twisted. I want to be in the same city as you. Go to university together. So that was what he'd been thinking. All this time. But it wasn't necessary. Not anymore. Her voice turned cold. Calvin, if you do this, I'll lose all respect for you. Another pause. Then, she added, do you really want us to not even be normal friends anymore? Chapter 18. Calvin ended up choosing a Grande after all. Alice passed her cultural exams and was accepted into a dance academy in the same northern city. Meanwhile, Emily and Benjamin were headed south to the ocean, to warmth, to a new beginning. There were no accidents, no hospital visits, no basement fires. The lives of all four veered onto different tracks, no longer tangled in painful loops. Their three families still maintained good relations. They celebrated with joint graduation dinners, full of polite toasts and shared nostalgia. At the airport, their parents even arranged to send them off together. In the waiting lounge, Benjamin and Emily sat near their gate. Their flight was bound for the south. Calvin and Alice's gate was across the terminal heading north. The parting was simple.
Quiet.
At the final boarding call, they all stood. Emily handed Benjamin a backpack and clutched his arm gently. Alice tried to take Calvin's hand, but he subtly pulled away, his gesture cold, distant. His eyes flicked to Emily. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it. No words came. Emily gave a small wave, her voice calm.
Goodbye.
The gates separated them, two different flights, two different futures. One heading south, toward the sea. The other disappearing into the north. And maybe, just maybe, it would be a long, long time before they ever crossed paths again.